Hey, Bass and Bob members, welcome to our Monday evening seminars. We'll be doing these seminars from now till September. We're very, very fortunate here at Lake of the Ozarks to have a lot of pros, expert fishermen, fishing guides, help us out with doing these seminars and basically give up the information. We never give up spots, like this point or that point. But it's all about patterns, baits, fishing techniques, setups, like what your line, what your rod and reel, kind of need to be, what your line size needs to be. And summertime fishing can be really tough on Lake of the Ozarks. I mean, we're fortunate right now. They're running a lot of current, which for a lot of fishermen, that really presents a great opportunity for ledge fish and main lake point fish, but that's going to shut down here pretty soon, and there's other patterns going on as well. But the bite is really good here on Lake of the Ozarks. Again, I appreciate everybody that helps us out, Big Ed, Coach, Wayne, Dion. I mean, our lineup for the rest of the year. Who we got next week? I don't know. I'll introduce Andy in a minute. Steve?
I forget who we have next week.
Next week we got another good one. I know we got Marcus Sikora coming up pretty soon too. We've got Josh Schnabel. What I really like, and I think all of you members will really enjoy, is the fact that I put Robbie and Ben in charge of this year instead of me, because I'm always calling Dion and Wayne, and those guys are great and they'll give us great information. But what Robbie and Ben have done have really they have great relationships with a lot of the young, I'll call them young, I don't even want to call them young and up and comer. They're kind of young and proven fishermen, and that's really awesome. So we've got this unique blend of the veterans as well as the guides that go out there and have to catch fish every day, otherwise they don't get a tip, right, Big Ed?
Yeah.
So they got to get this. And you know what's really cool is I love the fact that a lot of our fishing guides here at the lake actually come to these seminars too, because not only are they here to support Bass and Bob, which I appreciate greatly, but they're here also to learn some new information, in person with the opportunity to ask questions.
Marcus Sikora is next week.
Oh, so next week is Marcus Sikora. So that's cool. So anyway, so tonight we have, you're going to love this. This guy has just been on fire for the last several years. I hate to say you're an up and comer because you've arrived. I got Andy Newcomb tonight. I mean, let's just put it in perspective. In the last couple of years, he's won lots of tournaments. Young guy, which awesome. Won the Missouri Invitational Tournament at Old Kinderhook last year, which turned into 3 days of fishing. So it turned out to be all about fishing, with against. I won't even say against, because you're really fishing against catching the fish, not against the other anglers, but at the same time knowing that Missouri Invitational is star-studded with anglers from all old big-time anglers, Mike McClellan, and Jason Vance, and Bill McDonald,
Been doing it forever.
local greats, like Roger and Dennis and Marcus, and I mean Robbie too. Kind of put him in the Andy category. Kind of a young and up and comer, but have arrived. He won that tournament, which is freaking amazing, and that is not easy to do.
Angler of the Year.
I was about to say. And then Angler of the Year, so FLW has multiple divisions around the country. Again, the Ozark Division, one of the very toughest divisions in the country. Again, all those same anglers I mentioned, plus add 200 more. I say including me, but not really. I've gotten close a couple of times, but I fish it every day. Really great competition. Won Angler of the Year in FLW this year, and that's great. That's wonderful. That's to be congratulated. But then from there you go to a regional tournament and fish against like 6 or 7 other regions. Where was that this year?
Grand Lake.
On Grand Lake, okay, in Oklahoma. And fish that in the top 6 in that. And again, we're talking about now combining 6 or 7 regions. In the top 6 in a multi-day tournament make the All-American, of which 50...
I think there's 50 people in the entire country.
50 in the entire country make the All-American. And so Andy like backed it up, highlighted it, underscored it, did great, and made the All-American. So we hope for Andy to do really great. That's just off the freaking chart. So anyway, so we're very, very fortunate, and we appreciate, Andy, so much that you come tonight and share some of your fishing wisdom with us. So for some of you that may not know, I'm going to introduce you to one of the, is not even an up-and-comer, but an arrived young angler who does great, Andy Newcomb. Thank you very much, Andy.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Bob. Like he said, that we're fortunate to have Bob. He really gives us a platform to, there's really not another lake you can go to in the country and be able to just type in a website and get all the information and see what's going on right now, what the trending baits are, any of that stuff. So pretty awesome to have Bob, and I really appreciate him inviting me, and appreciate the kind words. So thank you, Bob. All right, I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to sit down.
Yeah, go for it, buddy.
But, so we're going to talk about fishing right now, which this is one of my favorite times of year to fish. You get to throw what I like to call the cool stuff. I'm not much of a finesse guy. I'm not much of a spinning rod guy. Which all that stuff still works right now. You can catch the heck out of them on a drop shot, but that's just not my thing. So you get to throw the cool stuff, which is, big crankbaits, big jigs, flutter spoons, all that fun stuff. So what's going on right now? I just fished a tournament yesterday, and we had almost 20 pounds. The lake's fishing really well. It's still, I feel like it's maybe a little off from what it should be, just because the really big bags aren't coming in, which is normally 22, 23 pounds, 24 pounds this time of year is not uncommon. So, but it's fishing good. We caught tons of good fish. We had 3.5 pounders on the cold beam all day long. So it was a fun day. Kind of what we've been doing is they have been pulling some water. And what that does is it really positions the fish in predictable spots. So the main lake bluffs and points, anything like that, what I tend to look for is something that either comes way out into the main lake that causes a big current break, and to go a little deeper on that, looking for something different on that piece of structure. So a big rock, a little cut in the old river bluff, something like that that's a little different, and those fish are going to position themselves on that. And you may have a point that stretches 100 yards, and the sweet spot's going to be 3 of these tables combined. So it makes it to where you can make cast after cast and catch fish after fish. So it's a fun time of year. Kind of what we've been doing is pretty well the first thing I reach for is going to be a big jig. So this is just a homemade jig. It's a 3/4 ounce football jig, and I'm going to reach for that first because I can fish it a lot of different ways, and with a single hook I'm not going to lose many fish. I'd rather throw the crankbait because it's more fun to me, but if I'm fishing a tournament I'm going to throw this jig because your landing percentage is very high. So just a so like I said, just a homemade 3/4 ounce football jig.
What kind of trailer?
And that's a Biospawn Bio Bug is what that one is. I throw this one when I want a faster fall. It doesn't kick much. It's almost, I'd compare it to a beaver with a little bit more action. So this almost falls more like a 1 ounce. And so when I feel like you have to make the fish react, I'm going to throw something that I can, stroke it past their face or do something like that to really get them to react. And that fast fall does that. I've also brought.
How are you working that? Are you stroking it, or are you dragging it?
I mean, it depends on the day. If the fish are active, you can just drag it,
Right.
and they'll bite it. But if you know the fish are there, and you have a hard time getting them to bite it, that's when I'm going to start stroking it, or reel it and kill it, something like that. That it doesn't give them time to look at it. It just goes by their face, and they either eat it or they don't.
Got it.
And so when I want it to fall slower, I'll throw the vile crawl, which I brought some of those too.
Let's see what that
It just flaps. It has bigger flappers on it, and it really slows it down, and it'll fall more like a maybe a 5/8 jig. So I pretty well, I'll throw a 1 ounce sometimes when the fish are 25 to 30 feet deep, which on this lake, they get that deep, but you don't usually have to fish that deep. So most of the time, 95% of the time, I'll throw that 3/4 ounce, and I'll just change the trailer if I want it to fall slower or faster. One thing I'll say is you want to throw that on a heavy action rod for sure, and a high speed reel. Tattoo SV 8-to-1 is what I throw for all my bottom baits, but you want a heavy long rod. This is a 7.3 heavy action. You want, because you're making long casts and the fish are biting 20 foot down, so there's a lot of resistance on your line, all that, so you really want to be able to drive that hook home. And I use a little bit lighter wire hook in my football jigs as well. So just all those things just make for a really high hookup percentage and landing ratio. So if I'm fishing a tournament, that's the first one I'm going to reach for this time of year. 20 pound Pro Elite 4 carbon. That's what I'm going to throw on my football jigs, my water spoons, my worms, all that stuff. Another one, which is probably even more fun to throw, but a little,
look at the size of that rod.
yeah, a little nerve-wracking is the deep diving crankbait. This one's made by Guggen Baits. It's a Grande Recon, I think is what they call it. But the biggest thing with a deep diving crankbait is you want something that deflects well off cover and that you can cast a long ways. That's, I mean, whatever brand you like, throw it, but you want to be able to cast it a long ways and you want it to deflect well. Because that bait, when you throw that big crankbait out there, it kind of goes in a big U shape like that. So the quicker it gets to the bottom, the longer you can stay on the bottom, and that's when you're going to trigger your strikes. Sometimes as soon as it comes up off the bottom, that's when they'll get it, but just reeling it through open water is not the best way to fish one. And as Bob pointed out, this is a big rod. It's a glass rod, but it's a medium heavy. It's 8 foot. I can bomb this thing. It's pretty parabolic, so when they're jumping and they got a ounce and a quarter bait in their mouth with treble hooks, it's harder for them to throw. I'm not going to say they won't. That's why I reach for this after the jig. But just having the right stuff really makes a big difference. You want a big reel. I use one with a wide, deep spool. This is the Tatula 150. But you want a deep spool so you can put a lot of line on it. And this one has brass gears in it, which I think is important when you're using something with that much resistance against your reel. It doesn't wear it out as quick. But that big spool, load it up with line, and you'll maintain your gear ratio at the end of your cast. It'll drop a little bit, but
What gear ratio?
this is a 6.5, 6.3. I'm sorry, 6.3 to 1. I don't go. A lot of guys throw like a 5.1 or something like that for deep cranking, but I feel like sometimes those fish hit it coming at you, and it's kind of hard to catch up to them with that slower gear ratio. And I like to burn it a lot of times, and with a 5.1, it's kind of hard to do that. I mean, you're really all day like this, and that'll wear you out, I think, more than just throwing a higher speed. So that's a fun one. This is I think a 15 to 20 foot, which is probably my go-to. When they get out deeper, I brought a box of stuff here, but when they get out deeper,
What size line? You might have said that.
12 pound.
12 pounds.
12 pound.
12 pounds.
12 pound.
Pound deep.
When I throw something like this, like a 10XD, I'll go up to 14. But for the 6XDs, this Guggen Baits, the DD22, stuff like that, 12 contest. You're not putting just a ton of pressure on the fish when you hook them with this. So that 12 pounds fine, retie often, and it helps you get down a little bit deeper.
Andy, do you feel it's important to have that bait digging into the rocks?
Absolutely.
Or can you catch them where they're not, it's not necessarily digging into?
So the only time I don't want it hitting the bottom is if I'm specifically targeting brush piles. And then in that case, you need to know how high the brush pile comes up, and then you choose a crankbait according to that. You know, if the brush pile comes up to 10 foot below the surface, you know, get something that'll dive 10 to 12 feet, and you know, you just bounce it off that, and you got to kind of worm it through, is what I call it. But once you hit that brush pile, I'll even stop reeling and I'll hold my rod up just like I'm fishing a worm and kind of worm it through those brush piles. And that's a good way to trigger a bite as well. But I love deep cranking, love it.
What is deep to you?
Deep to me, deep cranking is anything 15 foot plus.
Okay.
I'd say, you know, a medium diver for me is 8 to 12, 8 to 14, and then, you know, square bills and everything, shallow diving crankbaits. But I just love throwing a crankbait, and it's a lot of fun. I think when you get a school fired up on a crankbait, I don't think there's anything more effective for continuing to get bites cast after cast after cast after cast. It seems like they don't condition themselves to it as quickly as long as you keep getting in there. But the problem with a crankbait is you do lose fish. It's just part of it. You're going to lose more on a treble hook lure than you do on a single hook.
Do you ever feel like after you've caught a couple that maybe you moved the school, like you
That does
one
happen.
chasing it, two chasing it, three chasing that fish that's got a bait in its mouth?
So that does happen. I feel like that happens. I feel like that happens more in the wintertime when they're not as current driven. I feel like this time of year, and I can see it on my live scope now, you'll see them follow the fish a little ways, but typically they turn around and go back. But that is a problem. I mean, you'll move the school, but typically those fish, they're where they were for a reason.
Right.
So if you stay on that point or on that spot or whatever you're fishing, a lot of times they'll find their way back, and you can catch them again. So those are my 1-2. Obviously, a big worm is good because you can throw it, you know, in the brush. Sometimes when they slow the current down, those fish will suck into the brush piles, and you can't get anything through it better than a Texas rig worm. And this one is actually, this one's new. This is also from Biospawn, but they call this the Exo Ribbon. And what I like about it, I've always been a old monster guy. The problem with the old monster is there's not much meat to it. So this is a little bigger profile, and the cool thing about this, which you guys can see, is it's got a hook slot. So I really like that. So instead of having to Texas rig your bait and then bury your hook back in to keep it weedless, this has a hook slot, so you don't have to bury your hook back into the worm, which I feel like you get a higher hookup percentage.
Biospawn?
Yeah, this is Biospawn. Yeah, this is actually fairly new. I think I got some prototypes like last fall or something, so I think they just released it this year or something like that. But that worm is something I'm gonna throw, like I said, in the brush. You can put it on a shaky head and throw it out on them ledges and bluff walls and stuff too. But if they'll bite a jig, then I'm gonna throw it over the worm. Just because I don't have to fool with the trailer. You know, with this, you catch a few fish, and a lot of times you're fooling with putting another worm on. You know, they've torn it up, biting some off, whatever. With a jig, you glue your trailer on and take that fish off, make another cast. Take that fish off, make another cast. I'm all about being efficient.
What's your setup on that?
So this is actually, like I said, I'm not much of a finesse guy. This is a 7.6 heavy flipping stick, and the reason I throw that is because you're usually right in the middle of them brush piles. And so I actually caught one Sunday, and that fish was buried. It was a almost 4-pounder buried in a brush pile, and we had to get over the top of it and work it and finally get him out of there. And I just had to keep his head turned, and a lot of times that big rod is what does that. So same thing, Tetsuo SV, H1, high speed, any bottom bait, high speed. You want to, when they bite it, you want to be able to take up line and get a hook in them. So that's my setup for that.
Line size?
20 pound 4 pound.
And Texas rig or peg?
Texas rig, I do peg mine. I won't say I peg it. I don't put a toothpick in it or anything like that. I use a bobber stopper, but I separate it from the sinker a little bit. I think if you put it right up on the sinker, when that's falling, if you don't have it perfectly straight, it's going to twist, and not only cause line twist, but look kind of unnatural. So I separate mine a little bit, and that way when you're working it after you get through the brush, when you hop that, the sinker will hit the bottom and it looks kind of like the worm is chasing that sinker. But I almost always use a bobber stopper. And the reason I do that, besides what I just said, is when you're fishing a brush pile, if you picture your bait in the brush pile, if you pull that up over a limb and you're trying to work it real slow over that limb, a lot of times you'll get up that limb where your sinker will fall over the other side, but your worm doesn't. So if that fish grabs your bait over here on this side of the limb and your sinker's over here on this side of the limb, when you set that hook, you have a lot of slack in your line, and it's a lot harder to get a good hook in. So that's why I always use a bobber stopper.
Colors you like best on Lake of the Ozarks?
Plum, green pumpkin, after dark, black with red or black with blue. Pretty simple. I'm pretty simple when it comes to colors on anything. Green pumpkin, black and blue on my jigs. White on a swim jig sometimes, but I don't get too crazy. You know, colors I think are more for the fishermen.
Put a bait in front of their mouth and...
Right. Well, I think, you know, shades are important. So dark or light, I think, is important. But I think, you you look at Zoom's catalog, and it's, God, I mean, you can't even pronounce some of the names for the colors they have, and I think that's for the fishermen.
Yeah.
Which, whatever you develop confidence in, great. But I'll tell you, they'll eat green pumpkin everywhere I've went, they'll eat black and blue everywhere I've went. So, yep.
You like tungsten over lead weights?
I do.
Why do you like them?
Feel.
Feel?
Yep. Tungsten along with fluorocarbon. I can remember vividly the first time I ever threw a tungsten weight with fluorocarbon line, going from lead and monofilament. I kept setting the hook because I thought I was getting bites. You can just feel everything so much better. So yeah, I'm 100% I use tungsten. Sometimes I'll use my old lead, you know, for Carolina rigs sometimes if I've run out of what I needed, but tungsten, yeah. Lead's nice because it's cheap.
Oh yeah.
But typically if I'm fishing, there's money on the line, and so
You gotta do what you gotta do.
you know, I want to feel everything that's going on down there. I brought a little box, just kind of different shapes that are working this time of year, and just some of the stuff I throw. You know, a big shaky head is good. It's probably the best thing to get bites right now, but that typically requires moving it slow and dragging it on the bottom, so that's not towards the top of my list. But I've got a big swim bait in there, big hollow body swim bait, and that's another one that has a really good landing ratio when you get a bite on it, and it typically gets bigger than average bites. So a lot of times that swim bait's a good one after you've got 5 to really go after your kicker fish. Or if you're a person that just wants to go out and catch big fish, if you don't care that you don't get a lot of bites maybe, that big swim bait's a good way to do it.
When you say big, shaky head, how do you define big?
So I define big, just, that one I've got in there is a Magnum Trigworm, which is a staple. But, I'm going to throw this time of year, I'm typically going to start with like a 1/2 ounce. And that one I've got in there has a big heavy hook in it. So, when most people hear shaky head, they think, 1/4 ounce, little finesse worms, that sort of stuff. This time of year, you really, for the most part, most of the time, you don't have to do that. So you can fish a lot faster and be a lot more efficient this time of year because the fish are active. They're feeding. That's why they are where they are. They go out there, yes, to recover, but they position themselves where they do because that's where they have the opportunity to ambush the bait. They're there to eat. So if you get a bait in front of them, they're probably going to eat it. So you don't have to typically slow down and really waste time, in my opinion. So that's why I love June. Our lake is incredible. Like, we're so lucky. There's a lot of good lakes around the country, but this lake has so many 3 to 5 pound bass. It's just insane. I mean, you look at the weights in a 20-something boat tournament, you know, 5 20-pound bags, you know, and that's in the middle of the day, rough boat traffic. You can't exactly go everywhere you want to go as quick as you want to go there, so the lake's phenomenal. But June's a great time to fish. I really enjoy it. There's other things you can do. You can still catch fish on topwater. I threw a pencil popper in there. A lot of times early in the morning, those fish will move up on the points. And throwing a big topwater like that is maybe a way to catch your biggest fish of the day, really. Those fish are pretty opportunistic. They've been around. And they know that they can pull up there and maybe pick off, you know, some of the big bluegill or something like that that are up on the bank at night, or, you know, smaller bass. I mean, they're pretty opportunistic. They'll eat what they can. So that's a good way to catch a big one. If you just want to get a lot of bites, that shaky head, pretty hard to beat.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to beat.
So, Andy, I'm gonna ask you when you're done.
Go ahead, I'm done.
Pick out each of those and tell us a little bit about each of those and how you fish them, and
So,
kind of when you feel that bite might change, or you're looking
Right.
for water clarity
Okay.
scenarios or things like that, depth, whatever.
So starting on this side, we've got a 10XD. It's made by Strike King. This bait, to me, is a specialty bait. This is, you know, for deep water cranking, for big fish. I mean, you can see the size of that bait. This is not something I typically start out throwing, but it's maybe something I'll throw when I'm looking for bigger ones, or if I know a spot has big ones right now. You know, if I went out the day before and marked them down there and maybe caught one and it was a big one, you know, maybe I'll start with that. But that you're going to want to throw not on your normal cranking setup. You want a pretty heavy rod. Like I said, I'll go up to 14-pound test, and it's for deep water, you know. So that's kind of a proven bait. Everybody knows about the 10XD, but that's a good one. The next one we've got here is a flutter spoon, and this isn't the Magnum, you know, Ben Parker or anything. I think this one's made by Lake Fork, but this is pretty close to the size of, I think, most of the shad in this lake most of the year. I feel like most of the ones I see are 4 to 6, 6 to 8 inches long. That flutter spoon is fun. It's kind of hard to fish on this lake sometimes.
How do you fish that?
So typically with that flutter spoon, again on a bigger rod, you throw it out, it kind of sinks away from you like this.
Are you making a long cast?
Long cast to the structure that you're fishing.
Right.
Yeah, you're not jigging this straight up and down. You make a long cast, it kind of floats down. It actually sinks pretty slow for a big chunk of metal.
Right.
When it gets down there, you know, I start with pretty aggressive hops. I'll hop it twice, and then you let it fall on like semi-slack line, and so you can see your line will jump, and then I kind of keep track in my head of how long it should take to hit the bottom. If that line stops before then, jerk, because that's usually a fish. Sometimes you'll see that line jump, and you know that's a bite. But a lot of times, if it's falling, and all of a sudden it goes slack on top of the water, jerk, because that's probably a fish. And if it's not, you've just started your next retrieve. So that's another good way to catch big ones. It's a fun way to fish. Like I said, it's kind of hard to fish on this lake because it's kind of a double-edged sword. Everybody's put brush on every point, it seems like. So, which is great most of the time. Sometimes I think it gets in the way. A lot of times brush isn't needed on the spots that they're on this time of year. They're there because of the current breaks. So the brush kind of gets in the way, I think.
Are there depths that you like to target with the spoon? Or does it matter?
I mean, anything probably 15 foot or deeper. It's kind of hard to work too shallow, but anything 15 foot deeper, you can catch them on it. Like I said, it's a good way to catch big ones. and it seems to really get them fired up. They get aggressive when they're on that spoon. Next one's a pencil popper. This is a shower blow, which is probably the most famous one, I think. But Lake of the Ozarks in the summer, you probably don't think topwater a lot, just because of our water clarity. We don't have a lot of schooling fish in terms of busting shad on the surface. You know, our main forage is shad, not blueback herring. So they don't, blueback, when it's sunny, they're on the surface, like they go up to the surface and those bass follow them up. Well, shad don't really act that way. They'll stay down there in that deeper water. So this isn't an all-day deal for sure in the summertime, at least not for big ones. You can throw it around the bank, around shade lines, and catch a lot of fish all day. But early in the morning, if you throw this on bluffs or on main lake points, maybe those fish have slid up, that's a good way to catch a really big one. You may not catch many, but you might catch a really big one.
So pencil popper, for the back and bottom runners anyway, is probably a bait they haven't heard a lot about in terms of topwater. You know, there's the buzzbait, there's the spook, and there's the popwater. But tell us a little bit about the pencil popper, how you work it, kind of what's unique about the pencil popper versus some of the other topwater baits.
So a pencil popper is kind of a morph between a spook and a popwar. It's got a cupped lip on it right there, but it has the same walk the dog action of a spook. The great thing about a pencil popper is you can see how that's shaped and all the weight is in the rear end of it. You can bomb them. I mean, you can throw them a mile, and they kind of sit like this in the water, so you can pop them really hard, and they'll spray water 3 feet either direction.
Do you work it kind of fast, or
whatever.
Kind of work it like pop that water, pop that water, pop
So
that
that's
water,
something you kind of have to figure out day to day what they want. But I'm always going to start aggressive. So I'm going to start by working it fast and hard. And if they decide they don't want that, I'll slow it down a little bit. You know, you can make big wide. You know, if you pop it on slack line, it'll make a big wide sweep. Pop it again, it makes a big wide sweep to the other side. That's a good way to catch them last month.
Right.
You know, when they're up on beds or guarding fry and stuff like that, that slower kind of deal is a better way to catch them then. This time of year, typically you can catch them working it pretty quick and aggressive, but there's days where that's not how they want it. You have to slow down, but that's where I struggle. That's probably my weakness.
You're a power fisherman.
Yeah, slowing down is not really something I do very often. So moving from there is the big shaky head. So that's a Magnum trick worm on a jack-bait shaky head. It's got a big hook. It's a big bait, but it's not intrusive. So it's actually pretty subtle. It doesn't do much. You know, when it hits the bottom, the tail wiggles a little bit, but it's not putting off. You know, it's not moving a lot of water, any of that sort of stuff. So this is about as finesse as I get in the summertime. Just any straight tail worm, it probably doesn't matter. But I like something with a little meat to it. So that Magnum trick worm's a good one.
Are you dragging it or popping
Typically, you're dragging it. You're dragging it.
Feeling those rocks.
Shake it a little bit, counting the rocks. This is something where, if I've worked over a school and it's slowed down and I'm not getting bites, before I leave, I'll throw this. I'll throw it. It's hard to say it. I'll throw a drop shot.
Yeah. We all do. Right, Ed?
You know, it's just one of those things where when you've really worked over a school of fish, a lot of times it pays off to throw something back in there that's a little different, a little more subtle, and sometimes you can pick up another bite or two. And that trick's big ones. Don't get me wrong. You know, buddy of mine, Jeremy Lawyer, has won so much money all over the place, and that's, you know, one of his deals. You know, he designed this head for that worm.
Wow.
You know, he throws that a lot. He's made a lot of money on that. So, I mean, that's a good one for the beginners to throw, because you're going to get a lot of bites and you're going to catch some big ones.
Fish slow.
Fish slow.
Make sure you're in contact with
Drag it on the bottom. I mean, sometimes you can get away with hopping it a little bit, but it's not like where that jig where, you know, I'm really, you know, I'll hop it 4 or 5 feet off the bottom. But that's a good way to get a lot of bites. The next one's kind of everybody's.
Don't talk about that.
Yeah, nobody's heard about this. You know, brush hog. It's the standard in creature baits. It's another one that gets a lot of bites, catches big fish. It's a different shape. And really that's what I'm doing when I cycle through these baits is I'm just throwing different shapes at these fish, maybe different vibrations. So every bait's gonna give off its own vibration. And sometimes just change it to something a little bit different will get you another bite.
Is that on a shaky head? Or?
So no, this is actually on a wobble head, a swing
Wobble
head,
head,
some
yeah.
people call it.
Okay.
And that's maybe a trick I shouldn't talk about.
No, don't nothing about that.
We're transparent here.
Yeah. These wobble heads, the thing I like about it, this is a pretty light one. Believe it or not, that comes through brush really well. Really well, the light ones do. And the heavier ones, you can work it just like a crankbait.
What size is that? Or what
This
size
is I think this is 3/8. This is the one I'd throw through brush piles. But the heavier ones, the 3/4 ounce ones, this time of year, you can fish them 25 foot deep and just wind it like a crankbait. And the good thing about that is you got a big single hook. So if you can get them to bite that over the crankbait, you're probably going to land more. Now you really got, you got to give it to them though. When they're that deep and you've got a hook buried in plastic, you reel all that slack out of your line, you set the hook hard. You better have a heavy action rod and yep, swing on them and get them in quick. That's kind of the deal there. And the last one I've got in here is that swim bait. Big, I think this is a Zoom swimmer. It's just like it's very comparable to a Bass Tricks. The action's different a little bit. The shape's the same, but it's a good one. They're not cheap. I think they're $8 for three or something like that. But it's a good way to target big fish. And again, just a single hook. As far as the tournament guys go, I'd say most probably agree that if you can catch them on a single hook, do it because you're going to land more fish. But this is a good one. Like I said, you're maybe not going to get as many bites as say the crankbait or a jig or something like that, but it targets bigger than average fish, and you can target the fish that are suspended. If they shut the current off, some of those fish go to brush, some of those fish just get up off the bottom, and they become pretty hard to catch. And a lot of times you reel that swim bait just over them, and you get them to bite. Once you get one to bite, you can catch more. But getting that first one to bite is really the deal.
What size head do you like?
Depends on how deep the fish are. If I can see them suspended 10 feet or less, I'm going to throw probably 3/8, 10 to 15, maybe ½ ounce, and then below that 3/4 to 1 is what I'm going to throw. Another good one that I didn't bring with me is a scrounger head. And that scrounger, it's just a jig head with pretty much a crankbait bill built into it. And it's the same deal. That's kind of the good thing about this time of year is you can throw so many different things to catch fish. You open your tackle box and you can catch them on it. And like I said, you get to throw the cool stuff, the heavy stuff that you get to fish fast and get big bites. So I love June. I love catching them any way I can.
Right.
But June fishing, offshore fishing, is some of the best because those big ones get grouped up, and you can, once you find them, you can really work on them. So, if you can get out there, I think Coach, I was talking to him before we started, and he said he wants to get off the water by 11 most days, and this lake is not like any other, and the yachts and the boat traffic and the jet skiers, and I was telling my wife the kayakers, apparently, they come between you and the bank all the time. But it's one of them things where if you go out with the right mindset, you can really catch them this time of year. But just be careful, wear your life jacket, and take care of the fish. So I'm a big proponent all year. If you're not tournament fishing, you catch that fish, you take a picture, you let it go. I know there's pushback from people, and people can do what they want, and that's fine. That's how I do. This time of year, that's really important, I think. If you're not fishing a tournament, you take a picture of that fish, unless you're going to keep it to eat. Take a picture of that fish, let it go. Because these fish are stressed. They've just finished spawning. There was fish spawning a couple weeks ago. They just finished spawning. They're wore out. You caught them from way down deep. A lot of times, their swim bladder inflates. So there's a lot going against the fish. So take care of them. If you are fishing a tournament, always have ice, I always anytime I use ice, I add G-juice. It takes the chlorine and whatever else might be in the ice and neutralizes it. It gets rid of the ammonia in the water from the fish being in the live well. So just take care of the resource, because we've got a heck of one right here. You know, this lake, like I said, is incredible, and we want it to stay that way. So, you know, that's my preaching, I guess. But just take care of the resource, because it pains me. It pains me to see the fish floating at the end of a day of of fishing. So just take care of them. But.
So Andy, so this time of the year, let's call it right now, when they're running current, what's the type of structure? What's what you can see visually? On the lake, what you can see visually, and then talk a little bit about whatever graphing you might do or whatever. But what is kind of the best structure for somebody to go fishing this time of the year with some of the baits and techniques and patterns you've talked about?
So visually, just seeing with your eyes, it's kind of more difficult this time of year unless you're focusing on bluffs. You can see that bluff. A lot of times you can see the first ledge that comes out or something like that. And that's something visual. When the fish are shallow early in the morning, that main lake point, you can see it, that's visual. And you can catch fish in those places. A lot of times the better schools, the bigger fish are going to be, you have to find them with your graph. Or just you fish the lake for 30 years and you know what's where. But
you're not even 30 years.
Right, but I have graphs. So it's hours of idling, not making a cast, getting a sunburned neck, and not a lot of fun. But I'm not sponsored by Humminbird.
Right.
They're not on here. But I believe in Humminbird. I believe in Lake Master mapping for sure.
Yeah.
For Lake of the Ozarks, I don't think it gets any better. With mega imaging, they're kind. Before, so Josh, who you said is going to speak in a few weeks, I fished with Josh some, and he had Lowrance, and I was blown away by their side imaging and the clarity and all that, compared to my old Humminbirds. But when Humminbird came out with Mega, and then add that to Lake Master, I really don't know that you need anything else, especially on Lake of the Ozarks. Now I do have a Garmin for the live scope. For the video game fishing,
Has that worked out pretty well for you? You feel like?
Oh, absolutely. I think 3 of the fish we weighed in Sunday were on that live scope.
No kidding.
You can see individual fish down there. You can see the brush, and you can see fish in them. I mean, it's pretty incredible. But up until this year, I didn't have all that stuff.
Right.
So I just spent a lot of time. I would look for subtle things. Subtle points that would come out in the lake, little cuts on those points, and I'd idle. And you look for rough spots, you look for big rocks. A lot of times you can see the fish down there, especially if they're up off the bottom a little bit. But as far as seeing things, just looking at the bank and seeing what you want to fish, that's a little tougher. If you want to catch a lot of bigger fish, there's a ton of fish on the bank right now. I feel like there always is on this lake. You can go up there and throw a popper right now. You can throw a little shaky head, whatever, and catch fish. So for anybody who just wants to catch them, I mean, you see a wave break, go throw at it.
Right.
You see a bluff wall, go throw at it. I mean, there's fish there. But for the bigger fish, that's going to be something you're going to have to put in the time and idle around and find those little spots like that. Find the brush piles, find all that stuff. And brush, for me, hasn't been as big of a factor yet, but it's going to be. Usually come July, brush is the deal. They suck in those brush piles. A lot of times it'll be 1 or 2 fish in a brush pile, but the big ones get the prime real estate. So
yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So when they stop running the current, kind of what will the fish do? And when you talk about brush piles, are you talking about main lake brush piles, back to creek brush piles, secondary point brush piles around docks? Is there anything specific that you're looking for kind of when they shut this one, when maybe that main lake bite gets a little slow?
So, when they shut the current down day to day, a lot of times those fish will move into the close brush piles, the brush piles on the main lake, on the points, that sort of stuff. When they pretty well shut, when we get into our drought season that we'll have in the summer, that we typically have every year, a lot of those main lake fish will start sucking into the creeks. They may not go all the way to the back. I'm kind of a believer in there's fish that live in the creek, there's fish that live on the main lake, and then there's some that kind of go back and forth. But they'll start sucking into those creeks or coves or main lake cuts or whatever. So I think right now, it seems like the fish I've been catching out of brush are main lake related. As the summer wears on, we get into July and August, I'm probably going to start focusing more on the coves and creeks, and because a lot of those fish are going to, like I said, move in, and you can always check the back of the creek deal, because even if there's not shad present, there's bluegill, and I can always tell a bluegill eater when you catch them because they got a giant head and not so much of a body. But there's fish that live in the back of the creek. When the shad are there, they eat them. When the shad move out, they eat bluegill. They eat crawdads. They don't leave. They live there, and they just eat what's available.
What are your baits of choice for brush piles?
10-inch worm. I'll throw a brush jig, maybe a half ounce typically. That worm's hard to beat just because you can work it through so much. You don't get hung up much. I like a jig, like I said, just for ease of use. But when you're fishing brush piles, it's a lot less rapid pace, and you're not worried about having a school fired up. So that worm's usually the first thing I reach for if I'm fishing in a brush pile.
When you approach a point right now, I think I already know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
I know my answer.
Yeah.
You're not throwing up on that point and bringing it out. Are you throwing across the point and bringing it back to you? Or setting out on the deep side of the water and bringing it to you? How do you approach that point right now?
So how I approach a point is I think of how the current hits the point. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to idle that point, the day before or whatever, or the day of. I'm going to idle that point, see if I can find where the fish are positioned. But if it's a point I know, and I know how the current hits that, I'm going to try to bring my bait with the current at the depth I think the fish are. So if I'm catching most of my fish in 15 to 20, I'm going to try to make my cast into 15 or 20 and bring it with the current. A lot of times they're going to relate to something steep or a piece of structure down there. Now if I make a few casts and I don't get a bite, I'm going to change an angle. Because a lot of times it's just angles. The fish are there, and it's just the angle you present your bait.
You just have to have confidence the fish are there.
Yep.
Change your angles, work your depths.
And a big thing this time of year is knowing how that current actually hits something, because it might surprise you. If there's a big bend in the lake, you might think, well, the dam's there, so the current's coming this way. Well, a lot of times, if it goes around a big bend, if you can picture a river, it makes an eddy behind it. And a lot of times, if there's a big bend in the lake, so the dam's here, the lake bends like this, you'd think, okay, the current's going to hit this point here like this. Well, it went around that big point, and it's actually making an eddy, and it's coming the other way on that point.
That's great.
So I grew up fishing floating rivers and fishing rivers, and so those things kind of come natural to me, but that's not something most people think of.
That's great.
So you just kind of gotta,
That's too much.
right?
Just get keep going.
But you just gotta kind of think about those things,
Right.
and think about how the current hits something is the most important thing right now.
Got it. Cool. Andy, we got 5 or 6 minutes left. We have a lot of Bass and Bob members that have no interest in getting on the main lake this time of the year because of the big boats, or maybe doesn't have a boat to kind of really get out there, whatever, or have confidence fishing, 15 to 25 feet deep, whatever it might be. What are some ways that some anglers can catch fish this time of year? Doesn't have to be tournament fish, just get some bites and catch a good one once in a while. Maybe back in their coves or around some docks or something where they're not just leaving their own cove.
So if you don't want to fish the main lake, or like Bob said, if you don't have a boat or whatever, like a little 7-inch worm, like a power worm, on a light sinker, and throw that at everything. You know, brush pile, corners of docks, you know, in wells, whatever. You're going to catch a lot of fish. Or a little popper. I think you can catch fish on a popper most of the, until the water gets too cold for it. But those are ways to get a lot of bites. Something I grew up doing, throwing a rooster tail. Nobody talks about a rooster tail, but if you just want to catch fish, you throw a rooster tail, and you're going to catch not just bass, you're going to catch everything. Everything. And you take that and you throw that in the backs of the creeks, in the middle, it doesn't matter, just throw it. And if you just want to catch fish, that's how to do it.
I think I really like what you said earlier, is that there's fish that are relating to the main lake and the current right now, but there's resident fish that always live towards the backs of the creek or around docks and stuff like that.
And there is, and it's going to be a smaller population of fish. It's going to be a couple old bruiser, just nasty looking, gnarly fish, and then a lot of little ones.
Right.
But those fish, they live there. They've made their home. They've got a small area, I think, that they roam. And that's where they live. And like I said, they're going to eat what's available. Yeah. So this lake, the lake being so good, you never know when you're going to catch a big one. There's ways to pattern them and catch a lot of 3 and 4 pounders and do well in tournaments, but you can do something completely different and catch a big one. So you never know when you're throwing your popper in 3 foot of water in the back of a creek when it's going to be a 6-pounder that eats it. So, it's a great lake. Just fish it. And for the people who don't have confidence fishing deeper, just don't get overwhelmed with it. Yeah. If you think about how deep 10 to 15 feet is, it's not that deep. Right. It's really not that deep. So, it's just one of those things. You just get out there and do it and build confidence, and you'll catch them.
Andy, I got a couple more questions. I'll open up for questions and we'll end. But one question I have for you is, how old are you?
How old am I?
32. 32 years old.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. And be a great fisherman at 32.
I got socks on those.
So, what were the influences on you as it relates to becoming a good, not a good fisherman, but a great fisherman? What are the things, what were your influences, and what are some of the things that from, let's call it, I don't know, whatever age, 26, 22 to 32, whatever, that you felt really kind of transitioned you, if you will, to being just amazing competitive tournament fisherman?
Well, I appreciate that. So I've been fishing my whole life. My grandpa took me fishing. We did a lot of trout fishing, white bass, whatever would bite. That's where the rooster tail comes from. Just throw it, you're going to catch something. But I moved down here with my mom when I was like 5. And so I didn't spend any time on the lake. I didn't have anybody take me, any of that stuff. So when I turned 18, I bought a boat. Well, I started fishing the lake. I mostly targeted white bass and catfish and, things that were easy to catch, right.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a long time. And then, I've always been competitive. I've always played sports my whole life. I play softball on these fields here, but I used to play softball 5 nights a week. And anything I do, I want to be good at it. So I've had a few injuries and a couple surgeries, and the softball and the basketball and stuff was harder to do. And me still being competitive and loving to fish, it just kind of went hand in hand. And so I started, fishing a few tournaments. I bought my first new bass boat in 2014 and started fishing a couple tournaments, just local stuff, the El Harnum tournament, the Big Bass Bash. And, you cash a check every once in a while, and this is kind of like getting paid to fish. Yeah. Well, you also get your teeth kicked in by these guys around here a lot, which I didn't like.
Right.
So, I just put a lot of time in. My wife doesn't see me all that much. I'll be, this year, come the middle of September, I'm going to be gone for a month and a half. I think for a month straight I won't sleep in my bed. So, it's one of them deals where I've just put in the time. I want it. I think if you want it bad enough, you work hard enough, it comes. So, really, my biggest influence was my grandpa. just taking me, getting me started, just getting me to catch fish. And so anytime like I can take my niece and nephews and just, you know, bluegill fish. We bluegill fish off her parent stock. It's just, you get them started, and really that planted the seed, and it never even grew until, like I said, I got some injuries and couldn't play sports anymore. And but having that, you know, having him to take me when I was young, I really developed a love for it. And so that was my biggest influence, and then just, like I said, wanting to be good at it.
Time on the water.
Yeah,
I mean,
just-
so, I mean, you know, these fish here are patternable.
Yes.
Like the Ozarks.
We have enough
How
fish
did-
in this
how did
lake that
kinda
you
wrap
can
your head
pattern
around all of that, all the different. I mean, I know you've caught them from frickin' Ha Ha Tonka to the frickin' concrete at the dam.
Yeah,
And the river. I mean, that's a lot of water. And how did you kind of get your mind wrapped around all that?
So I'm pretty lucky. You know, I had some people ask me before coming or doing this. They said, "Are you nervous?" I said, "No." Yeah, I don't really get overwhelmed. I don't get nervous, and so I think that's one of the biggest qualities that's helped me with all this.
That's confidence.
And then so if I go out and I'm quote unquote fun fishing, I try not to drop the trolling motor if I've been there before. So I'm going to look at every inch of this lake if I can.
That's awesome.
And figure it out. And so that's kind of it. And sometimes, you know, maybe that hurts me a little bit because I've got things growing through my head. I could catch them this way at the 60, or I could go to the dam and try to catch them this way.
Sometimes too much information.
Exactly. But at the same time, if there's a part of the lake that's fishing better than the rest, I can go there and feel confident. So that's kind of how I attack that.
Cool. I'm going to open it up to everybody to ask questions. I have one last question for Andy, but before I ask my last question to conclude, does anybody have any questions for Andy?
One of the statements I got about Andy, and this is just a statement, I started watching him when he first started fishing. And he wasn't up there getting a lot of dock talk and stuff. Andy did this on Andy.
Yeah.
Andy did this on Andy, and that's what's really impressed me about him. Andy did it, he figured it out himself.
His own way.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's good stuff. And I think you got to be like that. You got to be your own man. I mean, you got to listen, take the information from Bass and Bible, whatever, but then go do, like Andy said, what his instincts tell him. Go ahead.
I was going to thank you for, I mean, we just celebrated Father's Day. What a beautiful story you just told about your grandfather taking you fishing. So,
Thank you very much.
I did that with my sons, and then my grandson is starting, so we wanted to bring him tonight. And
I'm glad you guys
he's
came.
got the bug, so I love your story.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Hey,
I'm the only kid. We got a couple kids here, don't we?
he's 13.
Well, John.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. You know,
Thank you so much.
my grandpa was a great man. We lost him way too soon, but I'm not an emotional person either. But I think it's important to take kids and get them started on something that's going to take them down the right path.
Right.
Not that they're not going to blow all their money on fishing stuff, but it's better than blowing it on
Yes.
drugs and alcohol or anything
Yes.
else. So,
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you for your story.
Thank
That was very touching.
One last question. Anybody else? Go ahead, Rick.
Say they're running 30,000 at the dam.
Mhm.
Do you prefer a bluff end that points into the current or trails into the current?
So that's actually kind of a tricky deal. Typically, I'm going to start with the ones that point into the current.
Okay.
But it depends on, you know, if there's a creek channel that comes out of the creek. So if you've got your point here, and this creek channel comes out of the creek this way, and the deep spot's here, that's not going to be as good maybe as a point on the upstream side that maybe makes a bend and has a steep spot here for the current to wash over.
Okay.
So it's another one of the things you gotta kind of look at the lay of the lake and think in your head how that current's gonna hit. So there's not a 100% this way or that way answer to that, but I'm typically gonna start with one that's gonna face into the current.
Okay.
That's a great answer. I've learned so much tonight, especially about, from like Andy said, the river fishing background, and then really paying attention to how the current is hitting something or creating an eddy. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I will put that to work tomorrow.
You're idling fish, Andy. How shallow do you think your boat will spook those fish before you can fish them?
So if I've found the fish to be in 8 to 14, 8 to 12, 8 to 14, I'm probably not gonna idle that point if I'm planning on fishing it right then. And a lot of times, even if they're deeper than that, a lot of times I don't like to idle it right before I fish. This lake's kind of a different story because these fish are pretty used to boat sounds and all that stuff. I think they get more freaked out from the pinging of our sonars than they do from an outboard engine running over the top of them. So I really don't think you're probably going to spook them too bad idling over them. But I'm still not going to do it if I know they're a little bit shallow. 8 to 12, I'm probably not going to idle over them if I'm planning on fishing them right then.
Questions? So Andy, probably I'm just kind of shooting from the hip a little bit, but probably 5 or 6 years ago, you would have been standing here doing a seminar with a shirt on like I have that says "Just Lose," right? That I bought online.
Right.
You got a shirt on here that's got lots of sponsors. Mm-hmm. They obviously recognize that you're a great fisherman and that they want their products presented on your shirt. Tell us a little bit about some of your sponsors and some of the differences you found with your Phoenix boat. I know
Okay.
you just got a new Phoenix boat.
So yeah, new this year is Phoenix. I've run a Bass Cat since 2014. And I'm not going to say that either one's better than the other. I love my Phoenix. I loved my Bass Cat. Both companies are great companies, which that's kind of what I try to align myself with, is good people. But I do love my Phoenix. It handles the rough water really well. It's pretty fast, which
Right.
it's fun to go fast.
For a 32-year-old. Not for a 62-year-old.
It's fun to go fast. And then Mercury, I've been with them for a few years, and everybody's got their preference. I think most companies make a good motor, and every once in a while, I think most companies make a bad one. But I've been super impressed with my new Pro XS. The 4-stroke is just unbelievable. It's got the torque of a 4-stroke, but it's got the high end of the 2-stroke, so it's very responsive. I mean, you give it throttle and it goes right now. So they've been good to me. They've supported me. So thank them. One of the first sponsorship I ever had was from Biospawn.
That's awesome.
And the parent company of Biospawn is Ketchco, which you can see them right here. They also make Guggen baits, and they have Shop Carls. So it's a pretty broad deal. But again, just good people, good values, and they make a good product. I've got Vicious, which I pretty much 95% of the time I throw their Pro Elite. It's strong as rope. It's good stuff. Your line is one of the most crucial aspects because it's what connects you to that fish. So don't skimp on your line. Just don't. But they're pretty affordable, but they make a great product. Anglersport, again, new this year.
They're a customer of ours. They advertise with us too.
Good.
They're a great organization.
A great group of people. Don over there was my salesman. He's maybe the nicest guy I've ever met in my life. So they're good to work with.
So for a Phoenix boat, check out Anglersport.
Absolutely. Go talk to them. They'll hook you up.
They're over
They'll take
in
good
Warsaw.
care of you. Yep. It's a new endeavor. It's a new relationship, but it's been a good one so far. So Daiwa, for me, and I know I've probably talked a lot about tournament fishing tonight, and maybe not everybody's into that, but for me, having the best equipment is crucial, and I could see that being the deal. Even if you don't tournament fish, you don't want to lose fish. You want to have the right rods for the right presentations. And when I came up with Daiwa, I left a company that I really liked, Denali Rods. They made good rods. Great people. But part of the stipulation with the deal I got with Daiwa was they wanted to use the rods as well. I've been blown away. I mean, I don't know that you could find a better product. I know Lew's makes a good product, St. Croix, they all do, but if you haven't tried Daiwa's new line of rods, the Tattoo Elites, you should. I think you owe it to yourself to at least give them a try, because they're pretty affordable. As far as a high-end rod, you know, most of those rods are 179, 189 retail. Yeah, retail, I said.
Very
But-
very affordable.
Yeah, pretty affordable. You know, and a great product. I skip docks a lot, you know, especially in the fall, and that Tattoo SV, no backlashes. I can throw an old school Smithwick Rogue, which I'm young, but I'm pretty old school, and I prefer the Rogue most of the time. And any of you guys who've thrown them know they don't throw very well.
No.
And I can throw that all day in the wind, and not a problem. So
That's great.
pretty awesome.
And Jack Bates?
Yep, Jack, Tom, the owner over there, he's kind of a jack of all trades. He's anywhere and everywhere. He's got his hands in everything. But you know, Jack has been great. They give me good products to use. He's a good friend of mine. You know, and I think that's what I've enjoyed the most out of all this is the friendships I've made with the companies that have supported me and just the people in the industry. And then, you know, I've got these companies here that aren't fishing related. Zach Sousley with S&S, he's been with me since day one. He said, I believe in you, I'm gonna help you. And then we've got Wyatt's, the Lake Barber Shop, keeps me looking good. It's actually,
That's where I go.
yeah, that's right. It's a real barber shop, which is pretty hard to find.
Where is it located?
It's on KK.
No kidding, Wyatt's, huh?
Yep, it's right next to Cozy Cafe and across from Central Bank. It's so any of you guys that want to go to an actual barber shop, go see him. And then my sister and brother-in-law own Scott and Son Well Drilling,
Yeah.
and they've been in business for 30-something years and complete well service. So again, just a good company and family. You know, got to take care of family. So
Great stuff, Andy, I appreciate that. Any other questions for Andy? Andy, congratulations on your success and continued success. And thank you so much. Appreciate it so much.